Introduction: Two worlds that intersect. It is true that no discipline seems to be a reason for joy at the moment, but rather a reason for sadness. However, it later produces a peaceful fruit of righteousness and peace in those who have been trained by it. Hebrews 12 verse 11. If you achieve something good with hard work, the work passes quickly, but the good lasts. If you do something shameful in search of pleasure, the pleasure passes quickly, but the shame lasts. Musonio Rufo. Imagine for a moment that you are walking the streets of ancient Rome, listening to wise men speak about the nature of suffering and serenity. At the same time, in a corner removed from Judea, a spiritual leader teaches the masses about the kingdom of heaven and the path to inner peace. Both scenarios, distant in geography and culture, converge in a profound truth: our reality is not shaped by the world around us, but by the lens through which we see it. It is intriguing to note the resonances in his speeches. We will explore these connections in detail, but allow me to give you a glimpse. Seneca reflected, saying, "Why do you point out other people's wounds when you are covered in scars?" In contrast, but with a similar tone, Jesus asked, "Why do you see the speck in your brother's eye and do not perceive the plank in yours?" Of course, from a Christian perspective, one cannot equate Stoic figures like Seneca, Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus with the figure of Jesus Christ, and that is not our intention. Figures like Seneca, Marcus Aurelius or Epictetus were mortal with their flaws, while Jesus is seen by many as the divine manifestation on earth. However, it is undeniable that both legacies continue to inspire and guide current generations. In this material, we will explore the similarities that, at first, leave us with a question in mind: could Jesus have a Stoic heart? I encourage you to revisit this content several times to assimilate its profound message. The connections between Stoicism and Christianity are truly revealing. The origin of Stoicism. As the words of Jesus and Seneca resonate in our minds, a feeling of familiarity washes over us. Although their lessons may have emerged from distinct and seemingly divergent cultures and traditions, they both share roots in a universal truth: inner awareness has the power to transform our outer experience. But before delving into the life and teachings of Jesus, let us delve deeper into the birth and development of the philosophy that is parallel, in many ways, to Stoicism. In the busy streets of Athens, the cradle of Western philosophy, in the 3rd century BC, Stoicism was born by the hand of Zeno of Citium. Influenced by the teachings of Socrates and the Cynics, Zeno founded a school in the Stoa Poikile, or painted portico, from which the name Stoic derives. The Stoics, initially led by Zeno and, later, by luminaries such as Seneca, Marcus Aurelius and Epictetus, argued that true happiness is not found in riches or recognition, but in virtue and wisdom. For them, life is not about what happens to us, but how we respond. While the external world is volatile and uncontrollable, our internal world, our thoughts and actions, are under our control. Herein lies the essence of his philosophy: living in accordance with nature, accepting what comes, and finding inner peace through self-control and virtue. One of ancient Rome's most admired emperors, Marcus Aurelius, a devout Stoic, wrote, "Life is short and the nature of existence is ephemeral, live like on a mountain." Like Jesus, who taught his followers not to store up treasures on earth, Marcus Aurelius reminds us of the transitory nature of life and the importance of living with purpose and meaning. With these profound reflections on life, death and virtue, it is inevitable to question how these Stoic lessons align with those of Jesus. Was a carpenter's son in the distant region of Judea familiar with these thoughts, or is it possible that he independently came to similar conclusions about human nature and the purpose of life? While keeping these questions in mind, let us now travel to Judea and explore the life and teachings of Jesus himself. Let's learn how this spiritual leader, who transformed the course of history, approached themes of wealth, life and truth. Jesus and his teachings. In the heart of the Roman Empire, in a marginalized region called Judea, Jesus of Nazareth was born, around the year 4 before Christ. Son of Mary and Joseph, he grew up in a world dominated by political and religious forces. Even though he was a revolutionary figure in his time, historical records about his life are scarce. Most of what we know comes from the New Testament Gospels. Jesus' context was characterized by Roman oppression and religious unrest. However, instead of leading a revolt against the invaders, Jesus proposed an internal revolution of the heart and spirit. His teachings, rooted deeply in Jewish tradition, present surprising parallels with Stoic thought. For example, in the Beatitudes of the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." In these words, he expresses a mindset that values humility and detachment from the trappings of the ego, something that the Stoics also valued. In Luke's Gospel, Jesus warns, "Be careful and stay away from all covetousness, because a person's life does not consist in the abundance of his possessions." This concept reflects the core of Stoic thought, which argues that true wealth is not in material possessions, but in the wealth of spirit and character. With his timeless wisdom, Jesus invited his followers to transcend worldly concerns and focus on eternal truths. Like the Stoics, he recognized that although we cannot control everything that happens to us, we do have control over how we react. And it is at this intersection of teachings, at this crossroads between Stoic virtue and the message of Jesus, that we find surprising similarities. Serenity in the face of adversity, self-control in the face of temptations, and the continuous search for virtue are ideals that the two philosophies share. With this in mind, we can consider Jesus a proto-Stoic, or say that, although separated by culture and tradition, both paths converge in universal truths. Continuing our investigative journey, we will delve deeper into these similarities, especially as they relate to virtue and self-control. Let us observe how Jesus, like the great Stoic philosophers, emphasized the importance of living with purpose, integrity, and unshakable serenity in the face of life's tribulations. Deep similarities, virtue and self-control. At the heart of Stoic philosophy lies a fundamental idea: the virtuous life is the only life truly worth living. For the Stoics, virtue is not merely a set of moral rules, but rather the essence of a good and meaningful life. Zeno of Citius, founder of Stoicism, defined virtue as a selective choice consistent with a rational disposition. In essence, virtue is living in harmony with reason and nature. In contrast, although Jesus did not explicitly refer to the term virtue as the Stoics did, his preaching on the fruit of the Spirit in the letter to the Galatians is profound. But the fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, faith, gentleness, self-control, wrote the Apostle Paul. These qualities, these manifestations of divine character, reflect the same quest for virtue that we find in Stoicism. Let us think about the serenity of Jesus, even at the climax of his suffering. Crucified, he showed a deep acceptance and understanding of his destiny. "Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do." His serenity in the face of adversity is, in many ways, comparable to the serenity that the Stoics aspire to achieve. Epictetus, one of the great Stoics, wrote in his Enchiridion, "It is not events that disturb people, but rather their judgments about them." This is a call to understand that our reaction to adversity is more determining than the adversity itself. The connection between Jesus and the Stoics in the pursuit of virtue and self-control is evident. Both see the external world as something that is beyond our control, but assert that the individual has control over their internal response. So, if Jesus and the great Stoics were together, what would they say about our relationship with the material world? Let's imagine for a moment Jesus talking to Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor. While the first warns about the dangers of wealth and the difficulty that a rich person has in entering the kingdom of heaven, Marcus Aurelius reflects on the ephemeral nature of earthly possessions. Together, they would invite us to detach ourselves from the material and focus on the true riches of spirit and character. But to delve deeper into this imaginary dialogue, we will explore further his teachings on detachment from the material world in the next chapter. Detachment from the material world, Jesus and Marcus Aurelius. Imagine a serene afternoon in Jerusalem. The ancient stones of the temple reflect the golden light of the evening. In a corner, Jesus of Nazareth, with his serene and profound expression, meets Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor of Rome. Despite the decades and geography that separate them, an invisible bond seems to unite their thoughts. Master of Galilee, begins Marcus Aurelius, I see in your teachings a profound wisdom, one that would resonate in the streets of Rome. You speak of detachment from riches, while I reflected on the ephemeral nature of earthly possessions. How do you see the relationship between man and his possessions? Jesus, looking at the emperor with understanding, responds, Truly I tell you, it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of God. The emperor nods, recognizing the depth of the message. In my meditations, he replies, I wrote that very little is necessary for a happy life, it's all within you, in your ways of thinking. Riches are often a distraction from this truth. Both leaders, from their different backgrounds, converge on a common understanding, material possessions themselves are not the problem. The challenge lies in the attachment we give them, in how we allow them to define our value and sense of purpose. As this imaginary conversation fades into the twilight, a profound question emerges for us all: what value do we place on the material things in our lives? Do they define us, or are they simply tools we use to bring well-being to our lives and those around us? As with his lessons on detachment, we find resonances in his teachings on loving others and the common good. However, we cannot overlook the fundamental variations in their essential views and practices. Jesus, with his unconditional love for others and call to serve, and Seneca, with his emphasis on virtue and the well-being of the community, present two complementary perspectives. But, what would reveal if they both shared a moment together? In our next chapter, we conceive a dialogue between Jesus and Seneca, inquiring into their coincidences and discrepancies and how each would approach themes of love, society, and the purpose of the human being. Love of neighbor and the common good, Jesus and Seneca. On a terrace overlooking a vast landscape of olive trees and golden fields, Jesus meets with Seneca, the prominent philosopher and advisor to the Roman Empire. The evening shadows begin to lengthen as both share reflections on a theme that has transcended generations: love for others and contribution to the common good. Seneca, with his firm and thoughtful voice, proposes, I observed, Master, that your teachings place great emphasis on love for others. In Rome, we also value the well-being of our society, although we often see it through the prism of justice and duty. How do you see this love? And how can it manifest itself in concrete actions? Jesus, reflecting an unfathomable depth in his gaze, responds, You shall love your neighbor as yourself. There is no greater commandment than this. Gospel according to Mark 12 verse 31. True love does not seek its own benefit, but overflows into actions for the good of others. It is through this selfless love that a true sense of community is built. Seneca nods and reflects. In our Stoic discussions, we have explored the idea of sympathy, the interconnectedness of all beings. I see echoes of your words. In my writings, I have said that the well-being of all humanity is interconnected. If there is a common benefit, then it is connected. It feels like we're both talking about a deeper understanding of how each individual action can impact the very fabric of our society. Jesus smiles slightly and adds, Every act of kindness, no matter how small, is like a stone thrown into a lake. The waves spread, touching hearts and lives beyond what our eyes can see. This is the kingdom of God, like a seed that, although small, grows and bears fruit in abundance. Seneca, with an expression of recognition, concludes, So, although our paths may differ in fundamentals and practices, the essence of love and the pursuit of the common good is a thread that unites us. Each of us has the ability to enrich and uplift our society through our daily actions and decisions. As the sun sets over the horizon, leaving behind a sky tinged with oranges and purples, the conversation between Jesus and Seneca fades, but its resonance lasts. She reminds us of the eternal importance of compassion, empathy, and unconditional love in building a better world. And as we reflect on this profound conversation, we turn to another exchange of ideas between Jesus and Epictetus, where we will explore fundamental differences in beliefs and practices. Differences in beliefs and practices, Jesus and Epictetus. The air becomes thick in a hypothetical room where, in a corner, Jesus sits with his compassionate and serene gaze, and opposite him, Epictetus with his reflective countenance. The meeting of two great minds who, although they shared universal values about humanity, morality, and purpose, originated from different foundations of belief. Master of Nazareth, begins Epictetus, throughout my life I have maintained that our will is linked to reason and that through it we achieve true freedom. What do you think about the nature of the human will and its relationship to faith? Jesus, always calm, responds, true freedom comes from knowing the truth, and the truth will set you free, Gospel according to John. And he continues, faith is the certainty of things hoped for, the conviction of things not seen, letter to the Hebrews. Epictetus nods, acknowledging the depth of the answer. In our reflections, we maintain that reason, when aligned with nature, guides us towards virtue. Faith, from my perspective, requires a suspension of reason. And while it is powerful, it can lead us astray from objective truth. To this, Jesus responds, each tree is known by its own fruit. Faith, when genuine, does not contradict reason, but transcends it, guiding the heart towards deeper and more eternal truths. Epictetus, quoting one of his own teachings, says, it is not the events that disturb us, but the interpretation we make of them. In this sense, our interpretation of the world, guided by reason, determines our well-being. The mood in the room changes slightly, not to tension, but to deep contemplation. Both recognize that, while they share the desire to lead humanity towards inner peace and virtue, their paths fundamentally diverge in the way they perceive and relate to the world. These differences lead us to consider the theological roots of Christianity and the Stoic worldview. While Christianity holds to a theocentric view of the universe, Stoicism leans toward a perspective based on nature and reason. Both philosophies have their merits and offer us different lenses through which to interpret and experience the world. With this framework in mind, it is essential to explore these differences further, while also considering how these perspectives can enrich each other. In our next segment, we will delve into Christian theology and the Stoic worldview, seeking to find the balance between faith and reason. Key differences, theology and worldview. The room, still permeated with the previous dialogue between Jesus and Epictetus, is filled with a new air of reflection. While the Christian faith proposes a personal God who intervenes and cares about humanity, Stoicism perceives the cosmos as a rational entity, a totality governed by what they called logos or universal reason. Christianity, with its rich theology, tells us of a loving God who became man in Jesus of Nazareth. This divinity, in an act of incomprehensible love, incarnates to redeem humanity from its failures. It is a religion based on the relationship, on the interaction between the divine and the human, between the Creator and his creatures. On the other hand, Stoics see the world as a reflection of a logical and natural order. It is not necessarily a personal God who governs, but a universal reason, a logos that permeates and structures all existence. Seneca, one of the most prominent Stoics, mentioned in his letters to Lucilius that God is not separate from the world, he is within it. This perspective promotes the idea that living in harmony with nature and its laws is the path to wisdom and virtue. Despite their differences, both views can complement each other. Christianity's theological focus emphasizes the importance of relationship and grace, while Stoicism, with its emphasis on self-discipline and self-control, can offer a framework for living this grace in a practical way in everyday life. So, at the end of this exploration, we face an essential question: is it possible to combine the depths of Christian theology with the practice and reason of Stoicism? Can Jesus, with his revolutionary teachings on love and grace, in any way be considered a Stoic Messiah? What do contemporary referents think about these similarities? Kevin Rowe, renowned New Testament expert at Duke University, points out how Stoicism and Christianity have shared parallels and points of convergence throughout history. In the 2nd century, Tertullian referred to Seneca as Sic Noster or often ours, and Jerome simply called him Noster. Saint Augustine, in The City of God, also recognizes the influence of Seneca. This intersection between the two currents is palpable, which leads to an intriguing question: can being a Christian be harmonized with being a Stoic? Some try to unify these philosophies, while others highlight their differences. Although fully combining them can be challenging, it is recognized that a Christian can complement their faith with Stoic reflections, and vice versa. Josephson, who specializes in biblical studies, quotes Seneca when highlighting the importance of absorbing wisdom from diverse philosophical sources. Dodson comments, "Although for me, Jesus Christ is the way, the truth, and the life, I am convinced that Stoicism has enriched my Christian understanding in devotion." Kevin Bosch, an expert in clinical psychology and writer of Between the Portico and the Cross, supports this view and adds, "During my research, I discovered surprising similarities between Epictetus' ideas and some modern Christian positions on issues such as the family and reproductive ethics." Without labeling the Stoics as Christians, it is undeniable that they provide enriching perspectives for everyone. Parallelisms between his deepest teachings. In both Stoic and Christian scriptures we find parallel lessons about satisfaction. I don't say this because I have scarcity, because I have learned to be content in whatever my situation. I know how to live humbly and I know how to have abundance. In everything and by everything I am taught, both to be satisfied and to be hungry, both to have abundance and to suffer want. Paul emphasizes that it is the attitude, not the circumstance, that must be evaluated. We must investigate whether the rich man can be content if he falls into poverty, and whether the poor man can be content if he falls into wealth, according to Seneca. Regarding revenge, if someone strikes you on the right cheek, offer him the other too, said Jesus, while Seneca points out that only a small mind responds with the same coin. In the Golden Rule, treat others as you would like to be treated, taught Jesus. Where there is a human being there is an opportunity for a kind gesture, highlighted Seneca, while regarding mortality, the Ecclesiasticus says, think of your end at all times and you will never sin. You could leave life now, let that determine what you do, say and think, meditated Marco Aurelio. Regarding anxiety and worry oppresses the heart but a kind word encourages it, highlights Proverbs. Today I freed myself from anxiety, I discarded it because it was inside me, in my own perceptions, not outside, reflected Marco Aurelio. In love, continue loving one another sincerely, said Peter. Marco Aurelio comments on being free from passions and still being full. Regarding discipline, the Hebrews teach that no discipline appears to be a source of joy at the time, but later produces a peaceful fruit of righteousness and peace in those who have been trained by it. Musonio Rufo opines that, if you do something good with a lot of work, the work passes quickly, but the good remains. If you do something shameful in search of pleasure, the pleasure passes quickly, but the shame remains. Regarding anger, Ecclesiastes warns, in your anger do not be quick to become angry, for anger dwells in the hearts of fools. Seneca says that, nothing is more stunning than anger, and if it triumphs, there is nothing more arrogant, if it fails, there is nothing more foolish. About stillness, remain silent and recognize that I am God, says the Psalms. Marcus Aurelius reflects that, moving from one altruistic action to another with God in mind is where there is calm and stillness. As for the examples to follow, Paul suggests, be imitators of God, as beloved children, and live in love, just as Christ loved us. Seneca advises choosing a teacher whose life and conversation express the soul to himself, as protector or standard. Finally, about loving your enemies, Romans recommends, if your enemy is hungry, feed him, if he is thirsty, give him something to drink. Seneca speaks of invincible kindness when sincere, and Marcus Aurelius, that kindness can even correct a malicious adversary, if you persist in showing him kindness and gently point out where he made a mistake. Conclusion, Jesus, a Stoic Messiah. The journey we began, crossing the sands of time and philosophy, led us to contemplate the possibility that Jesus, the Messiah of the Christian tradition, could have shared similarities with the great Stoic thinkers. Both philosophies, although unique in their approaches and perspectives, converge on universal truths about humanity, morality, and purpose. While Christianity delves into the depths of divine love and personal relationship with God, Stoicism offers us practical tools for living in accordance with nature and finding serenity in the midst of life storms. Reflecting on these teachings, we realize that, regardless of our religious beliefs, there are valuable lessons that we can incorporate into our daily lives. As the Gospel of John mentions, they will know the truth and the truth will set them free. So whether you identify with the teachings of Jesus, the reflections of Marcus Aurelius, or simply seek a deeper understanding of yourself and the world, there is an invitation here to live with purpose, with integrity, and with a love that transcends all barriers. If you made it to this part, allow me to thank you deeply for your love and attention given to the video. And if you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel to continue learning and nourishing your mind with more philosophy. I await your reflections in the comments section. It's always an honor to read you and know what you think. Here I leave 2 videos that could be of interest to you. Take care and see you soon.